I recently watched a video from a late midlife YouTuber explaining why they're done with dating, relationships, and traditional romantic expectations. The message was really simple. I'm not lonely, I'm at peace. I don't want to be responsible for other people again. And after watching it, I did a bit of digging into that YouTuber's other content and into how the so-called male and female loneliness epidemics are presented to the public. This is going to be a longer and more detailed discussion than usual because I think the issue deserves more context than a quick outline and some abstract data could give it. This will be a two-part series. Here in part one, we'll walk through that video that I just mentioned about loneliness and checking out of relationships, including the themes around the message and an analysis of its viewers' responses. Then in part two, that will come out in a few days, we'll take a wider look at how loneliness itself is broadly described and defined differently for men and women, and dig deeper into the Substack content from that same YouTuber that encourages walking away. And just a heads up, this is not a data or research-driven discussion like a lot of my other longer content, but rather an in-depth look at cultural aspects of how loneliness is portrayed and perceived in a case study of sorts. And for members, I'm also posting an ad-free version of this video in our members-only playlist, so you can get these longer discussions without ads. My videos are usually available to members about 12 to 24 hours before they go public, so moving forward, the ad-free members version of my longer content should be the first version that you see in your feed. Okay, let's get into this video about checking out of relationships and subsequent loneliness that I mentioned and see what it's all about. Here's a bit of information about the YouTuber who made the video, who talks, as I mentioned, about being done with dating, relationship, cohabitation, and traditional romantic expectations. It's a late middle-aged man, married 3 times, currently single. He has kids. It's a police officer at or near retirement age. Physically is overweight with plenty of gray hair. Here's several of the verbatim quotes in several categories from that video, and let me know if this resonates with any of you guys watching. One of the categories that had a lot of statements was around relationship opt-out, the cost of relationships. And again, I'm going to give you some direct quotes as we go through these. For example, I'm done chasing romantic relationships forever because I understand what they cost me. I'm not interested in investing my peace into something that has a high probability of disrupting it. They require a level of compromise that I've spent most of my life giving. There are also a lot of statements around provision exhaustion, so being a provider. For example, I've been taking care of everyone for a long time. My life is finally quiet and mine. I don't want to sign up to be someone else's end-of-life plan. I don't feel the need to pick up anymore, especially when it doesn't belong to me. And then there are a lot of statements around peace and solitude. And this is from the subsequent being single at this point. The statements made were, it's really just peaceful. I love my space. There's no walking on eggshells. It's just mine. There was some discussion about loss of attraction. For example, physical attraction just doesn't have the same pull. When you don't need that anymore, something shifts. And there were some comments also in, what are you looking here? Relationships must add something extraordinary, right? So one statement was, when I think about relationships, they would have to add something really meaningful and special to my life. And there was a little bit of talk also about connection without labels. For example, I'm open to sharing time with people, but I'm not interested in traditional dating in any way. No expectations to manage. My social circle is smaller. So what do you think? Is this loneliness? And I want you to think about what women and society say about guys when guys say things like, I don't want to be someone's end-of-life plan. I'm not chasing relationships anymore. I'm done chasing. There's no walking on eggshells. They would have to add something really meaningful and special to my life. I'm not interested in investing into something that will disrupt it. What's the general public consensus about guys like that? As you're probably very well aware, The male loneliness that we keep hearing about often describes men's wanting to be single, their withdrawal, and their disinterest in dating as loneliness, or at least avoidance, which is exactly what's stated in that video, again, with those comments that came directly from it. Guys who say things like that often get responses like, "No one wants you anyway. You're too old and no one cares. You can't get a woman. Divorced 3 times? You're the problem." This explains the male loneliness epidemic. And I know that men get those responses because I get those same hate comments just like those in my very own videos. For just a little bit of context around social engagement and loneliness, I'm not going to get into this very real deep, but at the national level, the Surgeon General frames loneliness and social isolation as a real public health problem. And the American Survey Center found that men's friendship networks have declined sharply, with 15% of men reporting no close friendships in 2021 compared to 3% in 1990. And very similarly, here we can see men appear to have suffered a far steeper decline than women. Women have witnessed a friendship decline too, but it has been far less pronounced. So the video I spoke about just a moment ago is just one example of a wider society in which many men, by choice, have fewer social supports, smaller circles, fewer close friends, and less emotional infrastructure than previous generations. And in that video, I think the strongest alignment with male loneliness issues is the disclosure of role exhaustion. Like decades of providing as a husband, a father, and a police officer, and then not wanting to become a provider again, or someone else's life plan, or to be responsible for someone else's health, finances, or past relationship baggage. All of that aligns, I think, directly with what's used to describe men's own causes of their loneliness, right? So lacking desire for connection, not wanting emotional entanglements, not approaching women, and reducing social circles. All of that is often used as causes of men's own loneliness. Now here's the twist. I said that the video was from a man who was now actively disengaging from women and society. But it was actually made by a woman who is disengaged from men and society. Yeah, I just played a dirty trick on y'all. Not sorry. I said it was a 3 times divorced, gray-haired, late middle-aged, overweight male police officer who was a provider. In fact, the video was published by a 3 times divorced, gray-haired, late middle-aged, overweight female nurse at or near retirement who described herself as a caretaker. Everything else is the same, including the verbatim statements that I gave earlier. Other than those descriptive and role swaps, everything is the same.
I've been married 3 times. When I say I'm done chasing romantic relationships, it's because I understand what they cost me. I'm just not interested in investing my peace into something that has a high probability of disrupting it. They require a level of compromise that I've spent most of my life giving. As a wife, a few times briefly, as a mother, as a nurse, I've been taking care of everyone for a very long time. And now my life is finally quiet and mine.
I'm done with dating. I value my peace. I don't want to carry somebody else again, and being alone is not the same as being lonely. When people think it's a man, women in society say that he's romantic risk avoidant, and he's withdrawing from gendered expectation roles like pursuer, protector, provider, and he's expressing unwarranted avoidance of women in society that causes the larger so-called loneliness epidemic. But now that it's a woman, the same attitudes sound more like caretaker burnout. It's more like post-divorce self-care, and self-protection, and withdraw from the expected feminine role of relational manager, emotional caretaker, and domestic stabilizer. She explicitly says in her video that she's been a wife, a mother, a nurse, and that she does not want to become a caretaker again or take on somebody else's health issues, finances, or emotional baggage. She says it, and women applaud her. Yeah, girl, me too. In fact, let's see how women responded to her own video. So much like I did with this John Deloney video a few months ago, I asked ChatGPT for help analyzing the comments to this 3 times divorced woman's video about bailing from relationships and finding peace from it. When I analyzed the video comments, there were 132 comments with another 75 responses to them. I didn't analyze those 75 responses closely, but look at the 2 comments that had the most replies. The largest comment thread when I analyzed them was about refusing domestic or caretaker roles again, which had 11 replies. The female commenter loves not having to compromise over daily issues or daily life anymore and does not want to be a caretaker, a cook, a dishwasher, a laundry service, or a sounding board for lonely older men. The comment with the second most replies at the time was about protecting peace from needy people who resurface in midlife, and that one had 6 replies to it. Now, this comment warned women about old friends reappearing after divorce, having financial trouble, experiencing loneliness, and personality problems, and actually said to not let other people move in, borrow money, or turn you into an endless emotional support system. How's that for being selfish and avoidant? The irony is thick, right? But now let's dive in deeper into the comments. Again, when I analyzed them, there were 132. About 85% of the 132 comments appeared to be coming from women based on names, self-descriptions, mentions of being wives, mothers, experiencing menopause, different things like that. There were a few men in the comments, but they were a very clear, obvious minority, and not really enough to add much value to this conversation. So I'm not going over their comments. And as we'll see right now, the comment section is overwhelmingly affirming of the woman's disengagement and portrayal of loneliness, which I've sorted into several themes by proportions of women who made these types of comments. Leading the pack, about 60 to 70% of women made comments along the lines that peace has become more valuable than romance. This was the dominant theme. Women repeatedly said some version of, I love my quiet life, I love my space, I'm not lonely, I'm at peace. Several even describing being single as freedom, not deprivation. The second most, about 45 to 55, maybe about half of the comments had to do with relationships being viewed as too costly, just like the woman who made the video had commented. These comments validate the woman, the creator's language around the cost of relationships, and that they describe relationships as risk, labor-intensive, compromising, emotional destabilization, or even loss of self. One of the top comments here in this category was, the risk and hard work outweigh the rewards. The third most common theme, I would say it was about 35 to 45, maybe 40% of the comments were around caretaking exhaustion being the central theme. And this is the strongest gendered theme, I think. A lot of women that made these comments didn't just say things that like they disliked dating. They said that they were done being caretakers. The phrase nurse or purse appears directly, which I was not familiar with until I heard it, but apparently the nurse part taking care of people and the purse part being financially responsible for guys. So they don't want to be a nurse and purse. But let's see, several other commenters said that they do not want to become someone else's health plan, their emotional dumping ground, their cook, dishwasher, laundry service, financial backup, or an end-of-life caretaker. About the same amount, somewhere around 35 to 45, again, maybe 40% of the comments made some type of mention around marriage is often described as depletion, not fulfillment. So here the common pattern were statements like, I did it, I gave too much, I lost myself, and I'm not doing it again. One woman says that she was married 3 times, took care of men, kids, pets, and worked full time, and that every relationship has cost me in every way. Somewhere around 30% of the comments were along the lines of being alone but not lonely as an identity claim of sorts. And this is important because it's something that men say a lot, but they're described as lonely anyway. Women who made these comments were actively rejecting the idea that being single means being lonely. In fact, one wrote, I'm alone, but I'm not lonely, and I protect my peace at all costs. So the comment section reinforces the same distinction that we discussed earlier. Solitude is being framed and legitimized as choosing peace rather than unwanted isolation. Somewhere around 30% of the comments included some type of mention around friendships, pets, family, and community replacing romance. So these women's comments rejected romantic dependency, any type of cohabitation or living together, and relationship obligations. They mentioned proxy supports through pets like dogs, cats, even kids, girl gangs, friends, family, God, hobbies, and a few different things. One commenter wrote that all she wants is herself and friendship, while another says that her friendships, her dogs, and her chaos-free life are now her focus. And then there were several comments about bitterness, somewhere around 10 to 15%. I'd say maybe about 15 to 20 of the comments. For example, anti-male framing such as claims like relationships are very, very bad deals for females, and that men are subhuman, dragging women down. So when compared with the male loneliness framing, this comment section shows a corresponding phenomenon, but with different social permissions. When men disengage, the public conversation moves quickly toward loneliness, bitterness, avoidance, and failure. When women disengage, the framing often becomes healing, wisdom, freedom, and boundaries. The underlying behavior can be very similar, but the cultural interpretation changes quite a bit. So let's talk more about that contrast and that interpretation. If a woman says it, people hear boundaries, healing, peace, and self-respect. When a man does, many people would hear bitterness, avoidance, fear of intimacy, misogyny, red pill, emotional shutdown, or, as I said, loneliness. So overall, here's what we hear from women when one of them discusses this topic. She's healing, she's choosing peace, she's done taking care of other people, she's setting boundaries. But when we circle back just a bit to think about how the same video would be received by women if it were made by men, if a man said,
I've been married 3 times. I'm done chasing romantic relationships. I understand what they cost me. I'm just not interested in investing my peace into something that has a high probability of disrupting it. I've been taking care of everyone for a very long time. And now my life is finally quiet.
many women would interpret it like he's bitter, he just wants casual access without commitment, he's emotionally avoidant, he can't handle intimacy, he wants the benefits of women without the responsibility of being with them. He's blaming women for his own failed relationships. I mean, hell, women wrote all of that in the comments to the video I just mentioned. We can see it spelled out. They're saying all of these things about men, and the video wasn't even made by a man. And if men made the comments like these women did, the guy would be considered a total toxic douche canoe. Tell me what you think, but for me, the biggest difference is the framing of caretaker versus provider. When she says that she does not want to be a caretaker again, women instantly validate it as exhaustion from being a mother, a wife, and a nurse. When a man says he does not want to be a provider again because he's exhausted from being a husband, a father, and a police officer, society screams that it's just an excuse because he's weak and doesn't have the balls to take financial responsibility for women. Because male provision is treated as his duty rather than as a burden that he chooses whether or not he wants to carry. But this is not just about one woman's video about checking out how it relates to loneliness or how women respond to that. We started with a video that sounded like it could have come from a burned out midlife man who was done with dating and tired of carrying responsibility, and he's now protecting his peace through disengagement. Then we revealed that the video was actually made by a woman, and the overwhelming response from her audience was not concern, correction, or diagnosis, but validation. Peace, boundaries, freedoms, no more caretaking. But this doesn't stop with just one video or its comment section. The same pattern shows up in the way that loneliness itself is publicly presented, and it gets even more revealing, I think, when we look at the video creator's broader writing content. So here's what we're going to do. Coming up in part 2 in a few days, I'll look at how this same pattern appears in the broader public framing of loneliness itself, particularly what search engines tell us about male loneliness versus female loneliness. And then I'll go one layer deeper and look into this same YouTube woman's broader writing, because her video about opting out of relationships is not just a one off. Her other content on Substack connects to a larger worldview about men, authority, self trust, and what women are encouraged to disengage from. So come back for part 2 soon, because that's where this moves from an old woman's video about opting out to a much bigger cultural pattern of how society is being trained to applaud women's solitude while men at the same time are being pathologized when they no longer want to be involved. Cheers, my friends. I'll see you soon in part 2.